I want to start by saying and acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, which is the traditional and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and we are all treaty people. So that acknowledgement can't be left. So a little bit about myself to kind of share my background is I am a junior high phys ed teacher by trade. I've been teaching in Halifax for 15 years. So in very urban settings, middle of Halifax for many, many years, but I grew up in Guysborough, Nova Scotia, which is a very rural setting. So my schooling, I've had a unique experience of being present as a student in a very rural school, but having my professional experience in a very urban center. So I've seen quite a few different situations, but I'm very curious to hear about some of your experiences. So as Steve mentioned, this session is about keeping students active and moving during COVID-19. So we'll go through. A little bit of background. The physical activity framework, although Steve mentioned that if we had time, we'd go through it, I feel like it's a great way to sort of organize thoughts around engaging students. So I'm actually leading off with the framework in the sense that it really creates a scene. And I really see this framework now as being a very poignant and sort of timeful resource for all schools. So I'm going to start with that. So keeping students physically active is not a new concept. It's something that has been talked about in school settings and educational systems for a long time for very good reason. There are many policies present in Nova Scotia that really sort of highlight the need of students being physically active. So one of those things, if you look on your screen under the current policies heading, we have an active transportation policy present right now. So active transportation would be how students are traveling to and from school, whether it's on wheels or walking or jogging. And we have many different ways that students can get to school, but this policy really highlights some of those. The Glaze report that was released a few years ago now, recommendation 13, really stressed the need to have students active and how it contributes to their overall success in schools. We have an action plan, the Education Action Plan, which specifically highlights physical activity as well as our Let's Get Moving strategy, which is province-wide, that really highlights how our entire population needs to sort of move more and sit less, as well as health promoting schools. So many of you maybe have heard that term before. And in fact, there's a session scheduled tomorrow by Scott Goyesh, which is talks about what health promoting schools are. And in fact, this whole physical activity framework is really based on that, the concept of health promoting schools. Steve, is there anything you kind of want to share about any of the policies that are in place?
No, Mary, I just a little context as well that the physical activity framework has not been adopted yet by any RCE, CSAP, or EECD. We're still in sort of the development stage and the drafting stage, and we're giving you a little bit of a sneak preview of what we're thinking is going to find its way in. And I think, Mary, we would acknowledge that we've done a lot of consultation engagement, and we were sort of in the middle of that engagement when COVID happened. So if you're hearing about this for the first time, it's because we still have not finished that engagement and consultation process yet. So just one little sort of contextual piece that I would add.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's sort of, COVID sort of put a lot of things on hold, of which this project was one, but it's definitely something that I think those of you that are sort of engaged in this session really will take an interest in. So it's a good opportunity for myself and Steve to sort of create a little buzz around it. So my presentation today is sort of probably what you would call preaching to the choir. If you signed up for this session, it means you yourself as an educator value physical activity and probably are aware of many of the benefits of it, but it never hurts to really sort of solidify that belief. So I will sort of review some of the research that's out there for that. And then all of us can sort of contribute to a document that I have already started that'll give you some resources and go-to, tried, trusted, and true resources and lesson plans that you may be able to modify or utilize as is in your classrooms coming up in September. So as I spoke about these policies, it's not very clear on this screen just because of the text, but having a physical activity framework or encouraging students to move or more movement throughout the school day in addition to physical education is not new, and it's actually written in many different policies. So this is something that, like I say, it's not a light bulb moment. It's been in development for many years, and many people are aware of the benefits. So Dr. Theresa Tam, who is Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, has been in the news quite a bit about COVID-19. But even before COVID-19 hit, Dr. Theresa Tam has been one of the biggest supporters and proponents of sort of preventative measures for chronic disease. And really, she states in this quote here that being physically active is one of the major contributors to an overall healthy lifestyle, and it can have a significant positive impact on health of individuals throughout their life. So again, we have not only folks in Nova Scotia that really would like to see this happen, but it's a nationwide concept. But we'd be remiss if we didn't focus a little bit on our own youth here in Nova Scotia. I know, Veronica, you mentioned in the chat box that you teach in the Philippines. So I'm very curious to hear, maybe at the end, if you're willing to share, no pressure, but if you are, I'd be very curious to hear if there's any significant differences with the youth in overseas countries as compared to Nova Scotia. But I think most of us are well aware that we sit too much and we move too little. And we hear, time after time that we have this drop off in the elementary years, at the very late elementary and going into junior high, where we have students that were normally very active. You could see them on the playground at recess or participating in lots of intramural activities. And then we find at that late elementary, early junior high, it just drops off significantly, the level of participation. So our children and youth really need more energetic movement to sort of combat that decline. So our good old participation report on physical activity for children and youth, I find that it gets sort of mentioned quite often during the release of this report card that comes out every year, about how we really, are not up to snuff when it comes to meeting those recommended guidelines. So the 2020 report card just came out a few weeks ago, and our grade this year, drum roll, is a D+. So this is for the second consecutive year that we've had a D+ grade. And you can see it on the screen there, 39%, only 39% of our children and youth are meeting any sort of recommendation with the 24-hour movement guidelines. So if you look down at the bottom, we've progressed from an F back in the 2010, early 2010s, up to a D-, and now up to a D+, but I know there's room for improvement there, and I'm sure we can. So within this presentation, there's a link to the participation report card. If you wanted to go through that, it's about 138 pages of really great recommendations, really strong data to support some of the observations. It's definitely worth a read. I just did a quick little snapshot here of an overall grade, but the participation report breaks things down with screen time and things like that. So as you can see, these the 2020 participation report card has the biggest stat I kind of wanted to bring to your attention is in green. So 4.6. That's the number of hours per day that the average student in grades 6 to 10 in Canada spend in just screen time pursuits. So whether that may be for fun, I know my own children, I've been yelling at them quite frequently to stop playing Fortnite, or whether that might be social media and things like that. So I'm going to stop right there. And I'd like to open it up. Is there anybody that has any comments on sort of any of the stats that you may see there? Is there anything that surprises you, or do you see a trend within your schools? I love the crickets. That's okay. You know, it's I'd just be very curious at various locations see the same trend that those stats are showing.
Hi, Mary.
Hi.
I do find, so I teach this past year I was grade 6, the next year I'll be grade 5, 6. But having taught lower grades as well, I find that kids in the lower grades are so much more eager to participate in, getting up and moving activities within the classroom. But teaching upper grades, it's really hard to find those activities that the kids are like, oh, I'm too cool for that. I'm not going to get up and do that. I really find that only about, I don't know, half of my students are actually willing to get up and do those movement activities. So that's what I find challenging in the classroom.
Yeah, and that fits definitely with the trend that the participation report card shows. It's, you know, they're very keen and willing to do sort of anything when they're younger, but exactly as you mentioned, you know, they're too cool for that, or, you know, it's much more challenging as an educator to find those activities that can get everybody going. So hopefully at the end of today's presentation, we can kind of guide each other in some resources or things that may be successful. All right, so I'm going to continue. So screen time, as you can see here in this photo, I mean, it's all of us, right? It's sort of a shift in societal culture, really. I myself am, you know, I have an iPhone for one job and an iPhone for another, and accessible at all times. So all of us sort of have progressed in that direction, but it's a matter of really creating those opportunities that we can be more active. If you can't beat them, join them. The idea of not having any screen time would be very scary to some. To most, I would venture. So really trying to figure out how we can have a sort of a little bit of the screen time when needed, but really focusing on more movement is going to help us all in the long run. So we all are aware of sort of the move it or lose it. So it's the importance of just moving. Exercise is sort of, you know, thought of as something a little bit more structured, a little bit more prescriptive. But really, the gist of physical activity is essential movement, just to create sort of the conditions for optimal health and well-being. So think of it more as just sort of moving as opposed to that prescripted sort of fitness, exercise type strategy. Spark. The Spark book and Dr. John Rady have done more for physical activity and showing the benefits of it than anything in recent memory. Most people, even if they aren't sort of even thinking about physical activity as a benefit are aware of Spark and have sort of joined in on discussions about the Spark book. And then that has led them to a path of thinking, hey, maybe physical activity is a way that I can increase academic achievement in my classroom. Maybe physical activity is a way I can curb behaviors that aren't beneficial to a classroom environment. I'm not sure how many of you have had sort of some exercise bikes or Spark bikes in your classroom that may be used from time to time for students that need to expel a bit of energy just to refocus. But this book in and of itself has really talked about the science of exercise and the brain and the benefits, and has really put things to the forefront. So here's just a little sort of a diagram that I find is, you know, doesn't leave much to interpretation in the sense of you can visually see a difference on a small one scan of many. But on the left-hand side there, you can see this is the brain after sitting quietly. There's, a little patch of green and yellow, and I'm not even sure what that means, but I know it means activity. And then on the right-hand side, just after a 20-minute walk, not a fitness routine, not going to the gym, not participating in a marathon, but just a 20-minute walk, the activity in the brain is increased by immeasurable amounts here. So scientific scans have even shown that physical activity has a positive effect on activity in the brain. As I mentioned about the participation survey, so when that comes out every year, it creates headlines. Sometimes you hear about it on the radio, but there are many different articles and research papers that have been out in the past, I'd say 50 years, that really talk about the same type of thing. So again, I said this at the beginning, but it's not a light bulb moment. I wish it was something that we just came up with that said, hey, guess what? What about exercise? Maybe that'll help increase academic achievement, but it's not new. So some of the headlines that you see here, it's, talking about the mental health aspects. So can exercise help treat anxiety, which is from Dr. Rady, who wrote the Spark book. But it boosts test scores. Can it boost test scores? Why your brain needs exercise? Kids with ADHD, is it helping them? So like I say, it's out there. It's many folks are starting to really hone in on physical activity as having many benefits. Here are some of them here. So I mentioned how it activates sort of brain development and thought processes, but it increases academic achievement. If we look at students that are sort of leading active, healthy lives, if you look at academic achievements, they tend to correlate. So if the belief would be there, or one would tend to lead to sort of the overall impression that if we are able to create more physical activity opportunities within our classroom, perhaps that would help increase our academic achievement overall. School engagement. Many schools that I taught in, that as a physical educator, the only days that kids really would come to school would be on physical education days, or days that they knew they had a certain type of intramural activity, or a day where they were participating in an after-school run club. In some situations, the school engagement was reliant or correlates with some sort of physical activity. And that ability to focus, like I say, if you had any of those Spark bikes in your classrooms, the students would get on for a little exercise bike for 10 to 15 minutes, and their ability to hone in on whatever was being led by the teacher after that brief period was much more focused, and they were able to concentrate better. The health benefits go without mention. We all know that moving more leads to healthier activity levels and positive mental health. The socialization that comes with that decreases maybe the amount of screen time, although I see many people out for walks looking at their phone at the same time, but it does lead to a decrease in those behaviors. The emotional regulation and self-control, again, that goes with sort of that that focus, the ability to refocus after brief periods of exercise. The problem solving sort of goes with, if we can picture that brain scan that I showed you. I mean, if you have increased brain activity on a scan, that problem solving ability goes there. And I'm not sure as brain plasticity, but studies show that the growth of new brain cells happens through physical activity. So I'd be remiss if I didn't, I'm one of those people that like to practice what I preach. So what we're going to do now is something called a box burst. And I really have no way to sort of prove that you're doing this or not, but I'm going to keep my camera on so that you can see me do this. So a box burst is something I'm going to explain later on, but it's just a brief period of physical activity that is meant to sort of refocus. So me talking for the past 26 minutes, look, I understand that I'm probably not the most exciting person, so I want to practice what I preach here and get you to do a little bit of physical activity. So feel free to turn your camera on or leave it off. I can't prove that you're participating, but if you're willing to join me on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a song, and it's going to be a very recognizable song to most of you as soon as I start it, but it's something that you can use in your own classrooms. It's so simple of an activity. And what I'm going to do is, as the song is playing, there's one word that gets repeated quite often, and you're probably going to figure out just through thinking processes what that word is. But every time we hear a certain word, we're just going to get up and we're going to do just a squat. So whatever range of motion you're willing to put in, just a little squat to work those legs. If you don't want to work your legs, every time you hear the word, you can do an arm reach with a stretch. Every time that you hear it, arm reach with a stretch. And we're just going to do that for a little bit, and we're going to see if we can get the heart rate up. So hopefully this works. So I'm hoping you can hear that. Okay, I'm going to stop it right there, just because we're in the essence of time. But with any luck, I'm hoping you actually heard that was Thunderstruck by AC/DC. So the idea of this little sort of activity burst or sort of activity break would be that every time the word thunder is spoke, yourself along with your students would just stand where they are, or if they, want to just move their arms, even as a student, every time the word thunder was spoke, you do that exercise. And if you Google it, I think the word thunder in Thunderstruck is spoken 50 times or so. And I participate in a boot camp every day, and I don't think 50 squats are done in one of those. So you can kind of assume at the end of that the heart rates would be up. And it's something quick, no equipment needed whatsoever, and whatever exercise you decide could be modified at any time, as well as the song. En français, if anybody teaches French or has an all French school or in a school with a different language, you could easily find a very traditional song and sort of create the same thing. So that's just a quick little example of something that you could easily do and integrate. And I'm out of breath already, so that goes to show that it does work slightly. So I hope you were able to sort of participate in that. All right, we'll get back going here. An hour goes quick. Thank you, Veronica. Like I say, it's an easy one to do, and once you get the idea, it's always nice to sort of change it up every once in a while. So as Steve mentioned, with the physical activity framework, we were sort of in that engagement and consultation phase when COVID-19 hit. So we were trying to really engage educators and health professionals and students. So now we're sort of, we still need to do quite a bit more, but we're getting there. So these were the, oh, go ahead, Steve.
Sorry, just so that folks are aware, the sort of the proposed adoption timeline was this fall to see it start slowly being implemented, and that was our sort of wish, let's say 6 or 7 months ago. So I think just before anyone is asking questions around, oh man, like what are you expecting us to do in terms of physical activity in the classroom, and especially with our colleagues, if you're for those that are outside of phys ed, and like what are the expectations in the school community. So just a little caution that that was our wish, that was our sort of projected timeline around bringing things on board before COVID. But obviously things are a little twisted now in terms of timelines, and I'll just leave it at that, just so there's a little context.
No, absolutely. And like I say, I'm sure all of us have experienced things that have been put on hold and postponed and that sort of thing. So yeah, it definitely was a wish list. But as I say, with this framework, I mean, it just fits in with sort of the overall health promoting schools concept, which I skipped over quickly. And again, if you want a little bit more information on health promoting schools and what that is and what it involves, there is a session tomorrow. I think it's in the morning, check on the schedule. But Scott Goyesh, who is a health promoting schools leader in the Strait Regional School Board, he is going to lead a session tomorrow on the health promoting schools. So the overall goal just of the physical activity framework, just to set a context again, like Steve mentioned, it's, this isn't something that's going to be top loaded down for something to do, but just sort of the purpose behind it. So you sort of get the concept of it. It's just to increase those opportunities, as I've already been mentioning, for students to get more physically active. That will contribute to their health and well-being, and really just changing the sort of the culture of a school to maybe have more of a culture of movement. So it is the physical activity framework, just as sort of like a concept of it. It is sort of focused on these sort of different categories or areas of focus, if you will. So it's sort of all of these things together, the student inclusion at the top, all students, the policy that we mentioned already, social and physical environments that maybe, that will help contribute to that, and the research, and of course, teaching and learning. So I wanted to bring this to your attention just because now we're going to really shift focus and go into that teaching and learning and sort of share some ideas on how to get students more active throughout the school day in addition to physical education. So like I say, physical education is fundamental movement skills. It is led by phys ed specialists. But what we're going to focus on is really, we have a classroom of 20 students. How can we create some lessons or some ideas or different things we can do within those 4 little walls of our classroom to get students active and moving? So what I'd like to do now is there anyone that have an energizer or something right off the top of their head that's something that they've done with their students that was easy, implementable, requiring very little setup, but was sort of really engaging for the students. So yeah, Michael calls them energizers. Lori mentioned brain booster. Is there anyone else that has a quick one, sort of like that thunderstruck idea that they'd be willing to share?
Hi, Mary. This is Veronica. Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so if you don't mind, I just have to turn off my camera, but I'm present here. So I'm from the Philippines. It's about 10:05 p.m. All right. Okay, so Mary, I would like to commend you for the physical activities we just have done, like the box burst. Yeah, Michael said that it's an energizer, brain boosters. I'm teaching chemistry, so it's quite different from physical education, but upon seeing the lineup of all the speakers and how to and which will I get in, I prefer to I've been keeping students active and moving during COVID-19. Chemistry is not actually a physical education course, but during the time of pandemic, when we're teaching our student in China, they're in a Sino-Canadian program, meaning it's a dual diploma. And our students will be going to Canada after the grade 12. And so teaching chemistry during that time was really a challenge. So I thought like organic chemistry. So I did a simple thing like bring me. So around the house, I asked the students to bring something organic. So I just give them a clue. For example, it is a kind of compound which is used for writing, and it can be erased. So at the count of 5, like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then they will gonna show the pen, okay, because it's a graphite, so it's a carbon. So they will show it to me, and or on turning on their video, and I guess that's one of kind of energizer and keep them moving around the house. And then the last and final says, bring me a kind of organic compound who is really love of your life. Okay, come on, it's something like that, shouting and energizing them and keeping them, alive and kicking. And then they grab actually their grandparents or their parents, their mom and dad, because during the pandemic, all the families are there, right? So I've asked them to ask their parents to go and to show in the camera and say hi to me and to show to their classmates. And so that's one that I made, which is very, I know, successful. So it's kind of a scavenger's hunt, but it's not. It's like bring me. So that's one of the way I did, and I think it's a successful one. Thank you, Mary. Thank you all.
That sounds fabulous. High school chemistry, if I think back, would have been probably a bit of a struggle for me, but if I was able to sort of run and get something, I probably would have excelled at that because I'm sort of one of those kinesthetic learners. I'm not sure if I would have found a compound that was the love of my life, but I like the like the idea, Veronica, so that's fantastic. Is there anyone else that has something sort of similar, or even if you want to mention it in the chat, I can sort of keep a record over there. Okay. So just for the sake of time, just because it goes so quick, I'm going to share now a document that I've begun or created, started to create, that I'm hoping that I'll be able to share with each of you, that you can continue to contribute it throughout this school year. and use it as a reference. So these are some resources that I found throughout just my research with the physical activity framework, and as well as a physical educator, that would be modifiable for an online type situation or in classroom situation where students may be in desks for long periods of time. So I'm going to go through and highlight a few of these resources. And again, feel free to ask questions in the chat or explore these sort of after we leave. I'll kind of share an idea I have with how we can get access to this later. So I'm going to go in and find that document for you. So what I've had here is sort of, I've broken it up into sort of charge form, where we have sort of the early years, so primary to 3, 4 to 6, and 7 to 8. So for those of you that are specifically high school or looking for sort of higher age levels, many of these can be modified for whatever age group you're dealing with. So although I don't have anything specific for high school here in this chart, please don't let that deter you from checking out these resources, because some of them are definitely there and able to be extended for older students. So the first one I'm going to sort of refer to is Box Canada. So that idea with Thunderstruck, what I just did, is an example of one of the activities from Box Canada. So Box actually stands for Build Our Kids Success. So as you can see here, it's a free physical activity program that gives you a significant amount of these sort of easy to implement box bursts, they're called. So it's quick little brain boosters that you can sort of have in your back pocket, that when you can read the room and sense that the students need a little bit of an activity boost, that they can do. There's also a resource here for Box at Home, which a lot of parents that I've spoken with had very positive things to say. So it's tons of resources that could be, beneficial. You do have to log in and create an account, but again, there's no hidden fees or cost associated with any of this. And it's just a plethora of sort of physical activity resources that you can go in there. So that's in the chart where you can kind of explore when you click on here. Phys Ed, PHE Canada. So PHE is our national body, which is really our go-to when it comes to anything with physical activity. Has an absolutely spectacular home learning center that, again, I'm going to click on here, that really has, again, numerous ideas that can be adapted to sort of any age group, home or not. And in fact, and not to put her on the spot, but I do think we have the president of PHE Canada in the room here, that I don't even think I would be able to really give these resources their due. I'm not sure if Lori would be willing to speak to anything that she would find right away that would be beneficial for sort of that go-to thing. What's that one thing, Lori, at PHE Canada on that resource site that you were like, yes, please check this out?
Wow. One thing. So the At-Home Learning Center, absolutely. And what is so great about the At-Home Learning Center, in my mind, is that it's a clearinghouse for not only physical activity / phys ed lessons that can be done regardless of the environment that you're in. And those lessons are created so that you do not have to have access to specific equipment. They're based on things that you can find readily at home or even within your classroom. And they're really engaging. And so you have that physical activity, phys ed component there. They were designed for the generalist teacher, so the non-specialized PE teacher or health educator, as well as the parent educator. And so you don't have to have a deep background in physical education or exercise science or kinesiology to be able to offer these lessons. And they're engaging, they're fun, they're age and developmentally appropriate. But they also have a full complement of health education lessons and activities to go with it that address a variety of different social and emotional learning concepts and skills, mental health, resiliency, as well as nutritional activities. And so there's that full complement that reaches the whole child. And so if you get an opportunity, check out the At-Home Learning Center. It has currently about 140 different activities. And within the next couple of weeks, we'll be adding 80 more. And as the year progresses, we will be continually updating that to be able to support students, staff, parents, support staff, in whatever manner they are engaging with students or their children. And so it's free, it's there for you. And so definitely check it out.
Awesome. Thanks, Lori. Sorry to put you on the spot there. I'm probably going to hear about that later, I think. But I mean, like I say, the phys ed, PhD Canada is sort of that go-to resource right away. And again, sort of the box program is something that I kind of stumbled upon as a physical educator when many classroom teachers were coming to me saying, what can I do? We're finding that we're not getting in the gym enough. I have a particular group this year that are very physically active and they learn better when they're moving. I need some help. So the box program came sort of through investigation there. So in the chat box, I put the link to that document. So I'm hoping when you click on that, you do have access. I think I shared it properly. Please let me know if you can't get access to that or send me an email and I can give you specific. But my thought is that you'll be able to access that and use it as a sort of a reference moving forward. But again, my hope is that as you do that if you find some other, it is working because I see all your little pictures are popping up. If there's things that you stumble across and you really feel it's of benefit, please feel free to add it to the chart if it's possible, because I mean, I find the best resources are ones that we've used or that we feel as educators would really be beneficial, not ones that are sort of prescribed. So that's sort of what I'm hoping. I'm just going to check the chat box here. Yes, absolutely, Steve, you nailed it. Really some ideas, all of these sort of lessons and things on here, the ones that we spoke of are sort of in that classroom setting. But we do know that outdoors is a fantastic spot for students, especially throughout this sort of COVID-19 pandemic. We know that the virus is less transmittable, or passing from one to one is better outside. So if you look here, we have a sort of a pilot project that's been going on in one of our regions called Active Smarter Kids. So I was able to reach out to the project lead for Active Smarter Kids, and she was willing to share some lesson plans where it gets kids outside. Some of the examples are math-based, so it's taking students outside, working on math outcomes, but in a very physically active way. So there's 3 links here. There's one to specific lesson ideas, so lesson plans in print form. They also have a YouTube channel that I've clicked here if you're sort of a visual learner, where it explains everything through video. And another lessons bank sort of here, where it's sort of some physically active lessons that may be beneficial. The Healthy Tomorrow Foundation, so in Nova Scotia, Kids Run Club is very prevalent. There's thousands and thousands of children that are active in run clubs all over the province. So Kids Run Club is sort of one of those quick and easy ones where if you did have a run club at your school, that it takes no equipment to run. Students are very receptive because it's just one of those things that you can do with friends. Of course, now with the limitations of COVID-19, I would imagine run clubs would be sort of limited to whatever sort of bubble has been formed, but it's still something that as a teacher you could easily lead. What's sort of not recommended is sort of things that had to be purchased. So especially if you're sort of teaching sort of a blended situation where you may be offering some suggestions for at-home learning, you don't want families to have to pay for anything. So keep an eye out for that. But what I've also added at the bottom here, so especially if you're a math teacher, there's some fantastic things through OFEA, which is the Ontario Physical Educator Association. Again, it's not phys ed per se, but it's a lot of different activities that incorporate sort of the math that comes with physical activities. Active for Life is another fabulous resource. And I really tried to focus on Canadian-based activities, just because our situation up here in Canada may be vastly different than other areas. But like I say, I'm hoping that one of these sort of tried, tested, and true that have come through, years of experience with me and working with other educators that have physical activity as a passion, I'm hoping that there's something in there that you'll be able to sort of bring into your toolkit and maybe start to sort of change the culture of movement within your own classes. But again, I'd love to see all of you sort of populate this table and make it a fantastic go-to resource as we go through this this sort of, I wouldn't say post-COVID because we're still there, but one of these sort of post-immediate pandemic that maybe we can start incorporating some physical activity. Thanks again, all of you. Just even logging on to this session means that you share that passion of really understanding that students learn better when they're moving, and that moving leads to better health. And the more opportunities that we can create for our students to do that, the better off they're going to be. And even as an educator, I spoke to a few of my friends who really were of the mindset that, physical activity is for the physical educator, or physical activity is for recess, or physical activity is for the soccer coach. When they sort of really started to implement some of these ideas within the classroom, although academic achievement was something, that they didn't see, they didn't choose to measure that particular aspect, but what they saw was an instant change in behaviors. So whether it was that ability to focus or sort of more that mental health aspect, where things that they spoke about, that students were, laughing a bit more and speaking to one another a little bit more, and students that would normally associate with another student, they were together. Physical activity is one of those sort of that universal language that brings folks together. So in my opinion, it's one of those things, it doesn't hurt to try. So any sort of more movement you can work in there, the better. So again, thank you so much. Please reach out to myself or Steve Machot if you have, any questions that sort of linger past this session. I'm more than happy to talk about physical activity with students. I can talk about it all day. So, and Steve knows that I'm kind of a talker and so passionate about this subject. So please do not hesitate to reach out.